Greetings everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Chinese Swords and Swordsmanship. I'm Scott Rodell here at the Great River Taoist Center, home to our Academy of Chinese Swordsmanship. Today I've got this really exceptional Chinese sword cane to show you. It's really an interesting piece, and it's exceptional for a number of reasons. For one thing, it's the longest example I've ever encountered. All the other examples I've seen are relatively short, not a walking stick length like this one, but a short sort of riding crop kind of length. And it's a really solid piece. It's hardwood scabbard or hardwood cane, if you will, with a leather covering and then a thick coating of dark brown lacquer over that with nice heavy iron fittings on all the ends and where the sword meets the cane part or the scabbard part. And on its own, this would be quite a weapon. I mean, just as a really, so even with two hands maybe, it's quite a solid, heavy, short staff or stick, if you will. On its own, or as a one piece, it's 2.5 pounds. That's 1,140 grams. So it's quite a solid club if you want to use it that way. And overall, that's 39 inches or 99 centimeters. So like I said, this is really a walking stick, not a riding crop or just a short kind of weapon. It's really a full-length kind of sword. When I draw it, take a look at the blade. This is really quite a nice blade. First of all, it's interesting. It looks rather thin, I know, but it actually has a good weight to it. At 27 inches, this is 69 centimeters. That is just shy of the average gen length for the Qing period. So you could really call this is a full weight and full size sword. It's on the light side for a gen or a Dao at 1.5 pounds, at 680 grams, but it's slightly tip heavy, which kind of makes up for that. If you have to give a quick solid cut, being a little more tip heavy really helps to deliver that. And at 680 grams, it's pretty solid. I couldn't cut a really heavy, thick target with it, but I could really hit hard and give what I would consider a robust cut with this blade. So even though it looks quite narrow when you look at it on profile, it's very thick. It's over 1/4 inch here at the base, so it's a very solid sword. And it's a very fine steel, I'd say. This is a Qiangan steel, which means that it's a pattern welded jacket or body, if you will, with an inserted hard steel edge. So this is not a cheap blade at all. It's a fine quality blade. And it's of a very interesting form. I know it's probably hard to really pick this up on camera, but the edge comes down to a very sharp edge, and it's still quite a keen edge there. But the back is like a saber. So this is dull on the back, thick, and comes to a fairly sharp edge. So this is what in Chinese you'd call a zhibei dao, or a straight back saber. And they were not common during the Qing period. They were common in the Tang and in earlier dynasties. But obviously, if you're going to put something in a walking stick, you need a straight blade. So I really like the feel of this piece. The way it moves, I can bring it around rather quickly and come up and change directions with it nicely. Still deliver a really solid cut, not as solid as a full weight weapon or say a heavier full-on Qing Dao or Jian, but definitely a solid cut. And that's because it's not a Jian profile cross-section blade. It has this saber more wedge-like cross-section geometry. It's also interesting that it has this spear tip. This spear tip, I think, is really quite interesting tip we've got here. It's beveled on both sides. So from here down, you could say it's like a Jian, but it has that spear tip kind of profile, which allows you to deliver really quick little Dian kind of movements, or of course a full-on thrust and really get in it. So obviously you can see it's really lined up, no problem to give a really good thrust. Now, the practitioners out there might be wondering, well, how are you going to index the blade? Because it is a round cross-section, how you do that. And that's actually not as tricky as you might think. Right? It is, of course, round all around, so indexing might seem like it's a problem, but there's this little release here. That's a little brass spring, and you have to push that down. It won't come out otherwise. If I really shake that, it's not going to come out. But I just press that with my thumb, and that releases it, and it draws. But of course, that is right lined up so the index is just right. So if I'm used to drawing this, if this were my own personal weapon, I would have no trouble having it and then coming, boom, feeling where that is, and drawing and cutting it very quickly. So it's a really interesting piece that way. And honestly, I find something like this quite intriguing because this was clearly made, given the quality of the outside, this heavy lacquer, the quality of the blade. This was not an inexpensive weapon. This was not some street thugs kind of weapon. So it's always intriguing, who might have carried this weapon? That's always something whenever I'm handling a piece, sometimes it's obvious. If it's a military type sword or a standard Dao, you can say, okay, that was a soldier's weapon. Sometimes by the fittings, you can tell the rank of the owner. But here, like this, who would have carried this? And so clearly somebody of means, right? Who's walking around with a stick like this, just even one that's not just plain wood, but that's been lacquered like this. And it's not just lacquered. Underneath that lacquer, it has that leather, probably a pigskin leather, that really reinforces and keeps everything nice and solid so that scabbard's not going to split apart. I mean, this piece is easily 100 years old, could be 200 years old. It's hard to tell just as this condition. It's certainly not a new piece. So it's been around for a long time and it hasn't split. It stayed together nice and solidly. So who might have carried this? Well, okay, somebody, a man of means. So you'd think, well, could have been somebody in the military. I mean, this is a weapon that, yes, cuts quite well, it handles well. This was clearly a sword, a weapon made for somebody who knew how to use it. This isn't just a little cheap dagger for a rich guy who has a little bit of a backup. This is pretty near a proper sword. So who would have carried this? I'm going to cross military officials off that potential list because they would have carried their own sabers and they would have carried something that showed their rank and position. So I'm thinking it's not them. So my next best guess is probably a member of the literati, somebody who had a fair position in Chinese society, in Qing society, somebody who was a man of letters, who was well educated, and obviously a man with deep pockets who could afford not just a weapon, but a really good quality weapon, but also, very interestingly, a man of letters and wealth who learned how to use a sword, which was really quite unusual during the Qing period when, as for quite some time in China, there was a separation of the one and the wu, of the civil and the martial, and there was this tendency for the literati, for the educated class, to look down on any sort of physical pursuit, particularly martial artists, people who made their living with their body. That was something well below the literati, below the educated class. So this guy, if I'm right, I think he would have been an exceptional person, somebody who would probably wield a brush beautifully, probably had nice calligraphy, and also really understood how to use a weapon and cut and intercept. So there you have it. I think very interesting, really exceptional Qing period sword cane. And so if you like this video, and I hope you found it interesting, please subscribe and hit the bell so you hear about upcoming videos. And if you're interested at all in learning how to wield weapons like this, interested in Chinese swordsmanship, check out the Academy of Chinese Swordsmanship. There's a link below, and I've put in a discount code if you want to give it a try and see what we do there. Okay, thanks everybody. Until next time, stay strong and 再见.